The salvage run the asteroid field stretched endlessly before Captain Elena Vasquez, like a graveyard of broken worlds. Chunks of rock, the size of city blocks, tumbled slowly through the void, their surfaces scarred by countless collisions. Her ship, the Iron Promise, weaved between them with practiced ease, its hull gleaming dully in the light of the distant star. Elena's weathered hands gripped the controls as she navigated through the dangerous maze. At 43, she had spent more years in space than on any planet, and the lines around her dark eyes told stories of solar winds and cosmic storms. Her black hair, streaked with early gray, was pulled back in a practical ponytail that swayed with the ship's movements. "Computer, scan for salvageable materials," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned to rely on herself. The ship's AI responded with a series of soft beeps, its sensors reaching out into the darkness. The Iron Promise was not impressive by military standards. It was a converted mining vessel, its hull patched with different metals. That created a patchwork pattern across its surface. But Elena had modified it herself, adding better engines, stronger shields, and enough firepower to discourage pirates. It was her home, her livelihood, and her freedom all rolled into one. "Captain," the AI announced in its neutral voice, detecting unusual energy signature bearing 27 Mark IV. Configuration unknown. Elena frowned, adjusting her course toward the signal. In 15 years of salvage work, she had learned to be cautious about unknown energy readings. They usually meant one of two things: valuable alien technology or dangerous alien technology. Sometimes both. As she approached the coordinates, her screens lit up with the image of something that made her breath catch. It was clearly an escape pod, but unlike any human design she had ever seen. The craft was elegant and curved, almost organic in appearance, with a surface that seemed to shift between deep purple and silver, depending on the angle of the light. "Well, I'll be damned," Elena muttered, bringing her ship alongside the pod. "That's definitely not human." The pod was damaged, its hull cracked in several places, and its energy readings were dropping fast. Whatever was inside would not survive much longer without help. Elena had made it a rule never to ignore distress calls, whether they came from humans or aliens. Space was vast and unforgiving, and everyone who traveled its depths deserved the chance to see home again. She engaged the salvage bay's magnetic clamps and drew the pod into her ship's belly. The process took 20 minutes, during which Elena found herself growing more curious about what she might find inside. First contact protocols were clear. Any alien technology or beings were to be reported to Earth Command immediately. But Elena had never been one to follow rules blindly. The Princess Awakens, the pod's surface was warm to the touch, and Elena could feel a faint vibration running through it, like a heartbeat. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, with no visible seams or joints. It appeared to have been grown rather than built, and strange symbols pulsed along its surface, in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. Elena ran her scanner over the pod's surface, searching for an entry point. The readings showed a single life form inside, unconscious but stable. The atmosphere within was oxygen-nitrogen, similar to Earth's, but with slight variations that suggested a different world of origin. "Okay, let's see what we have here," Elena said to herself, locating what appeared to be a control panel. The symbols responded to her touch, glowing brighter as she traced their patterns. After several minutes of careful experimentation, she heard a soft hiss as the pod began to open. Steam rose from the opening pod, carrying with it a scent like exotic flowers and ozone. As the mist cleared, Elena found herself looking at the most beautiful being she had ever seen. The creature inside was clearly female, with features that were both alien and strangely familiar. Her skin was a pale blue-green, like sea foam, and her hair was long and silver, almost luminescent in the bay's lighting. She was tall, nearly 6 feet, with a graceful build that suggested both strength and elegance. Her clothing was form-fitting and made of a material that seemed to shift between different shades of blue and purple. Most striking were her eyes, which were large and expressive, colored a deep violet that seemed to hold depths Elena could not fathom. The being stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and Elena took a step back to give her space. For a moment, the alien woman looked around in confusion, her gaze taking in the unfamiliar surroundings of the salvage bay. Then her eyes fixed on Elena, and something remarkable happened. Instead of fear or aggression, the alien woman's expression became one of profound relief. She struggled to sit up, her movements graceful despite her obvious weakness, and then did something that shocked Elena to her core. She slipped from the pod to her knees, pressing her forehead to the deck in a gesture of complete submission. "Please," she said in accented but perfectly understandable English, "I offer myself as tribute for your mercy. My life is yours to command." Elena stared at the prostrate figure, her mind racing. "What? No, get up. You don't need to do that." But the alien woman remained kneeling, her voice trembling with emotion. "I am Zarathik, daughter of the Cathari royal house. I have fled my people in dishonor, and I beg for your sanctuary. I will serve you in any way you require, for as long as you permit me to live." Elena reached down and gently took the woman's shoulders, lifting her to her feet. "Look, Zarathik, nobody needs to serve anybody here. You're safe now. That's all that matters." The alien princess looked at Elena with wonder, as if she had never heard such words before. "You got dot. You do not claim me as property? Property?" Elena's voice hardened. "Lady, I don't know what kind of society you come from, but humans don't own other people." "Not anymore." The story unfolds over the next several hours. As Elena provided medical care and food for her unexpected guest, the story slowly emerged. Zarathik spoke in halting sentences, often pausing to find the right words in English, but her tale was clear enough to make Elena's blood boil. The Cathari Empire was ancient and powerful, stretching across dozens of star systems, but it was also rigid and cruel, built on a caste system that determined every aspect of a person's life from birth. The royal family stood at the top of this hierarchy, but even they were not free. They were expected to sacrifice themselves for the good of the empire whenever the priests deemed it necessary. Zarathik had been chosen for the ritual of eternal service, a ceremony in which a royal would give up their life force to power the empire's great machines. It was considered the highest honor a Cathari could achieve, but to Zarathik it felt like murder dressed up in pretty words. "I have been trained since childhood to accept this fate," she explained, her violet eyes distant with memory. "But when the time came, I found I could not. I am a coward, Captain Vasquez. I fled rather than fulfill my duty to my people." Elena slammed her fist on the table, making Zarathik jump. "You're not a coward. You're brave. It takes courage to choose your own path when everyone else expects you to follow theirs." "But my people will suffer without the ritual," Zarathik protested. "The machines that power our cities, our ships, our way of life, they require royal blood to function. Without it, the empire will begin to fail." "Then maybe it's time for them to find a better way," Elena replied firmly. "No society is worth preserving if it requires the death of innocent people to survive." The conversation was interrupted by the Iron Promise's proximity alarms. Elena rushed to the bridge, Zarathik following close behind. The main screen showed 3 ships dropping out of hyperspace, their sleek forms unmistakably alien. They were beautiful in their own way, but Elena could see the weapon ports that marked them as warships. "Attention unknown vessel. came a voice over the communication system. Speaking in the same musical language Elena had heard Zarathic use. But the princess was already translating, her face pale with fear. "They demand you return me immediately," she whispered. "They say I am property of the Cathari Empire and must be surrendered at once." Elena looked at the 3 warships, each one twice the size of her salvage vessel. Her practical mind calculated the odds and found them laughably poor. But then she looked at Zarathic, saw the terror in those violet eyes, and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Tell them," Elena said, her voice steady, "despite the danger, that this is a human ship in neutral space. And on human ships, we don't hand over people against their will." The chase begins. The response from the Cathari ships was immediate and violent. Energy beams lanced out, striking. The iron promises shields with enough force to rock the entire vessel. Elena threw herself into the pilot's seat, her hands flying over the controls as she brought the ship about. "They're not messing around," she muttered, pushing the engines to full power. The Iron Promise leaped forward, diving toward the asteroid. Field with the 3 warships in pursuit. Zarathic had been thrown to the deck by the first attack, but she pulled herself up, her eyes wide with amazement. You defied them." "For me?" "Damn right I did," Elena replied, sending her ship into a spinning dive between 2 massive asteroids. Nobody gets to decide who lives and who dies except the person themselves. The Cathari ships were faster and more maneuverable than the Iron Promise, but Elena had spent years Lee **. What freedom really means, Outpost 7. Outpost 7 hung in the void like a massive metal flower. Its docking arms extended to welcome ships from across the sector. Elena guided the Iron Promise toward the station's commercial docking bay, her mind racing with possibilities. Admiral Chun had given her 12 hours to report with Zarathic, but Elena had used that time to make some calls of her own. The station was a hub of activity, home to nearly 50,000 humans and friendly aliens. It served as both a trade center and a defensive outpost, monitoring the border between human space and the more volatile regions beyond. Elena knew it well. She had been conducting salvage operations in this sector for years, and many of the station's residents were her friends. "It's enormous," Zarathic breathed, pressing her face to the viewport as they approached. "I had not realized human settlements could be so large." "This is just a small outpost," Elena replied with a smile. "You should see Earth sometime. Cities that stretch across entire continents, billions of people living their lives however they choose." As they docked, Elena could see the tension in Zarathic's shoulders. The alien princess had been quiet during the journey, clearly wrestling with the implications of her choice. Elena had tried to prepare her for what was coming, but she knew that no amount of preparation could truly ready someone for their first encounter with human bureaucracy. The docking bay was bustling with activity. Cargo haulers moved freight between ships, while passengers of a dozen different species hurried about their business. Elena watched Zarathic's eyes widen as she took in the diversity. Humans worked alongside tall, insectoid threx and the crystalline beings known as lumens. Children of various species played together in the observation areas while their parents conducted business. "They all seem so content," Zarathic observed. "In the Cathari Empire, different castes do not mix freely. Each has their designated role and space." "That's not how we do things here," Elena said, leading her toward the station's main corridor. "Everyone gets to choose their own role, their own space. It's messier than your system, but it's also more honest." They made their way through the station's corridors, past shops and restaurants and recreation areas. Elena had sent word ahead, and she could see familiar faces in the crowd. Marcus Thompson, the station's chief engineer, gave her a subtle nod. Dr. Sarah Kim, who ran the civilian medical center, caught her eye and smiled. Even old Captain Rodriguez, who commanded the station's defense force, managed a brief wave. "You have many friends here," Zarathik noticed. "More than I thought," Elena admitted. "Sometimes it pays to treat people decently." They reached the administrative section of the station, where Admiral Chun's office waited. But Elena made a detour first, leading Zarathik to a small observation deck that looked out over the station's central hub. Below them, a massive common area was filled with people going about their daily lives. "See that woman down there?" Elena pointed to a middle-aged human woman setting up a food stall. "That's Maria Santos. She used to be a corporate executive on Earth, but she quit her job and came out here to start a restaurant. And that man over there, the one teaching the children, that's Dr. Petrov. He was a university professor, but he decided he wanted to work with kids instead." Zarathik watched the scene below with fascination. They chose to abandon their previous lives. They chose to follow their dreams, Elena corrected. "That's what freedom means, the right to reinvent yourself, to become who you want to be rather than who others expect you to be." "But what about duty? What about responsibility to one's people?" Elena turned to face her directly. "The best way to serve your people is to be the best version of yourself. You can't help others if you're not allowed to help yourself first." The Admiral's dilemma, Admiral Chun's office, was smaller than Elena had expected, but it reflected the man himself, practical, efficient, and unpretentious. Chun was in his 60s, with gray hair and the kind of steady demeanor that came from decades of making difficult decisions. When Elena and Zarathik entered, he stood to greet them, his expression carefully neutral. "Captain Vasquez, Your Highness." He gestured to chairs facing his desk. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Elena noticed that Chun addressed Zarathik as Your Highness rather than using her name. It was a small thing, but it showed respect, something that would not have been lost on the princess. "Admiral," Elena began, "I want to make something clear from the start. Zarathik is not my prisoner. She's here voluntarily, and she's requested asylum from the Cathari Empire." "I understand your position, Captain," Chun replied. "But the situation is more complex than simple asylum. The Cathari have made their demands clear, and they're backed by significant military force." As if summoned by his words, the offices. Communication system activated. The holographic display showed the bridge of a massive Cathari warship, its commander an imposing figure in elaborate robes. Elena recognized the design from her brief encounter with the pursuit ships, but this vessel was far larger and more heavily armed. "I am High Admiral Dikvar of the Cathari Royal Fleet," a figure announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You are harboring stolen property of the Empire. Return the Princess Zarathik immediately, or face the consequences." Elena felt Zarathik stiffen beside her, but the princess remained silent. Admiral Chun leaned forward, his expression diplomatic but firm. "High Admiral, this is Admiral Chun of the Human Federation. The individual you're referring to has requested asylum under our laws. We take such requests seriously." "Your laws are meaningless," Dekvar replied dismissively. "The princess is royal blood, bred and trained for a sacred purpose. She cannot simply abandon her duty because of cowardice." "With respect," Helena interjected, unable to remain silent, "she's not property. She's a person with a right to make her own choices." The Cathari commander's eyes fixed on Elena, and she felt the full weight of his contempt. "You speak of things you do not understand, human. The princess has been prepared since birth for the ritual of eternal service. Her life force will power our civilization for generations. Would you deny an entire empire their future for the sake of one individual's selfish desires?" "Yes," Elena said without hesitation. "I would. Because that's what makes us human, the belief that every individual life has value. Thekvar's expression darkened. Then you are fools. You have 6 hours to return the princess, or we will take her by force. The Cathari Empire has treaties with your federation, but our patience has limits. The communication ended, leaving the office in tense silence. Admiral Chun rubbed his temples, clearly weighing impossible options. 6 hours, he said finally. Captain, I need you to understand the situation. The Cathari have 12 battleships in this sector. If they attack, we can't stop them. The station, the colony worlds, thousands of innocent lives, all at risk. So you're going to hand her over? Elena's voice was flat, but her eyes blazed with anger. I'm going to do whatever it takes to protect the people under my command, Chun replied. That's my duty. Zarathic stood suddenly, her movement graceful despite her obvious distress. Admiral Chun, Captain Vasquez, I thank you for your kindness, but I cannot allow innocent lives to be lost for my sake. I will return to my people. No, Elena said firmly, standing to face her. That's not your choice to make anymore. You chose freedom, remember? That means you don't get to sacrifice yourself just because it's convenient for others. But the lives that will be lost are not your responsibility, Elena interrupted. They're Thekvar's responsibility. He's the one choosing to threaten innocent people. He's the one who could walk away and let you live your life. Admiral Chun watched the exchange with growing understanding. Captain, what exactly are you suggesting? Elena turned to face him, her expression determined. I'm suggesting we call his bluff. The Cathari Empire has treaties with the Federation. Right? Those treaties include provisions for diplomatic immunity and the right of asylum. If we stand firm, they can't attack without violating their own agreements. And if they attack anyway? Then we fight, Elena said simply. Not because we want to, but because some things are worth fighting for. The colony speaks word of the situation spread quickly through Outpost 7. Within hours, the station's main assembly hall was packed with residents, all wanting to hear the truth about the crisis that threatened their home. Elena stood on the platform beside Admiral Chun, with Zarathic seated nearby. The crowd was diverse: humans, Threks, Lumens, and half a dozen other species. They were merchants and engineers, farmers and artists, families who had come to the frontier seeking new opportunities. Many had fled oppression themselves, whether from authoritarian governments or economic hardship. The situation is simple, Elena addressed the crowd. The Cathari Empire wants us to hand over someone who has asked for our protection. They're threatening war if we refuse. Admiral Chun has asked me to present the case to you, because this decision affects everyone on this station. She gestured to Zarathic, who stood slowly and faced the crowd. This is Princess Zarathic. Her people want to sacrifice her in a ritual that will end her life to power their machines. She chose to flee rather than die, and she's asked us for asylum. A murmur ran T**.